What if I told you the spiritual sensations people experience on cannabis aren't spiritual at all, but it all comes down to how THC hijacks our endocannabinoid system? Or what if I told you that modern neuroscience is actually validating what ancient shamans knew thousands of years ago? The truth lies somewhere in between. Today, we're mapping the exact neural pathways that activate during cannabis use, and discovering something remarkable about why humans across time have called this plant sacred. We'll see how a 2,500-year-old Vedic hymn lines up with a 2020 brain scan in ways that challenge our understanding of consciousness. First, we'll travel to ancient temples, then dive into brain scans, and finally explore how this synergy is reshaping therapy today. To understand this fully, we must first look to the past, where cannabis served as a cornerstone of spiritual practice across numerous ancient cultures. Archaeological evidence reveals a profound relationship between humanity and cannabis that stretches back millennia. Excavations have uncovered cannabis residue in ritual vessels dating back nearly 5,000 years in China and Central Asia, confirming what anthropologists have long suspected. This plant has been humanity's spiritual ally across diverse civilizations. The ceremonial preparation of cannabis varied significantly between traditions. In Vedic India, cannabis was crushed with milk to create bhang, consumed specifically during festivals honoring Shiva. Scythian shamans placed cannabis seeds and flowers on hot stones in enclosed tents, creating potent vapor baths that induced powerful trance states. These preparations were never casual. They involved precise measurements, ritual timing, and specific intentions. This reverent approach stands in stark contrast to modern consumption patterns. Ancient cannabis use occurred within structured ceremonial contexts, guided by experienced practitioners who understood the plant as a means of accessing higher awareness. Users approached the experience with clear intention and preparation, physical purification through fasting, mental preparation through prayer, and spiritual readiness through meditation often preceded consumption. On Holi, worshippers still lift bhang as an offering to Shiva, an unbroken thread to a 3,000-year-old ritual that continues today. The language ancient texts use to describe cannabis experiences is particularly revealing. Vedic hymns speak of dissolving the barriers between self and universe, while Taoist manuscripts describe cannabis enabling practitioners to become as vaporous as the immortals. These accounts consistently mention the dissolution of ordinary perception, heightened sensory awareness, and a profound sense of connection to forces larger than the individual self. In the temples of ancient Judea, cannabis-infused oils were used in anointing rituals to prepare initiates for prophetic visions. In Nepal and Tibet, cannabis aided meditation practices designed to transcend ordinary consciousness. Vedic texts warn cannabis could entrap the mind if used without fasting and prayer, showing a sophisticated understanding of both its potential and its risks. Many traditions described cannabis as activating specific energy centers within the body. In yogic practice, cannabis was sometimes used to stimulate the Ajna chakra, or third eye, associated with insight and intuition. Similar concepts appeared in Chinese medicine, where cannabis was believed to influence energy meridians associated with spiritual perception. Perhaps most fascinating is how these ancient descriptions align with what modern neuroscience is now uncovering. When ancient texts describe cannabis creating a dissolution of boundaries between self and universe, they're describing what neuroscientists now identify as altered neural connectivity patterns. To understand exactly how cannabis produces these spiritual-like experiences, we must examine the biological system at the heart of this ancient relationship. The biological foundation for these remarkable experiences lies in a system most people have never heard of, the endocannabinoid system. This extensive network of receptors evolved to modulate mood and perception throughout our bodies and brains. Cannabis simply supercharges it. Our bodies naturally produce their own cannabis-like molecules called endocannabinoids that maintain this system's balance. When THC from cannabis enters the bloodstream, it binds primarily to CB1 receptors concentrated in the brain. Unlike our body's natural endocannabinoids, which appear briefly and in precise amounts, THC floods these receptors with greater intensity and duration. This flooding disrupts the default mode network, DMN, while also tweaking dopamine and serotonin pathways that underlie time perception and pattern recognition. The DMN is a collection of brain regions that maintains our sense of self and separateness from the world. Neuroimaging studies show that cannabis temporarily disrupts this network's normal functioning. Ever stared at a painting and felt the colors pulse? That's your DMN loosening its grip. More on that in a moment. This disruption weakens the boundaries that typically define our sense of self, creating experiences that feel remarkably similar to what ancient texts described as dissolution of the ego or communion with the divine. Cannabis also increases cerebral blood flow to regions involving sensory processing and introspection. This increase in activity makes colors more vibrant, music more dimensional, and thoughts more profound. With enhanced blood flow to the visual cortex, users experience heightened perception of patterns and connections, while increased activity in the prefrontal cortex leads to novel associations between previously unconnected ideas. Brain imaging ties these changes to regions that tag time and sensory patterns, explaining the timeless, vivid feeling users describe. Some of the most compelling research comes from comparing brain scans of cannabis users with experienced meditators. The patterns show remarkable similarities. Both groups exhibit reduced activity in the DMN and increased connectivity between brain regions that normally don't communicate. These neural signatures correlate strongly with subjective reports of mystical experiences, including feelings of unity, transcendence of time and space, and profound significance. What's particularly fascinating is how these neurological changes create conditions that ancient traditions interpreted as spiritual. When cannabis disrupts the brain's regular patterns, it doesn't just create random noise. It allows alternative forms of connectivity that feel meaningful and transcendent. The same brain state that a modern user might describe as feeling connected to everything would have been interpreted by an ancient shaman as communing with the spirit world. But these experiences aren't created by THC alone. The cannabis plant contains hundreds of compounds that work in concert to produce its effects. The interplay between hundreds of compounds creates the unique consciousness-altering properties of cannabis. While the plant contains over 100 different cannabinoids, two play central roles in shaping the experience: THC and CBD. THC generates the primary psychoactive effects, altering perception and enhancing mood, while CBD counterbalances these effects, reducing anxiety while adding anti-inflammatory properties. High THC, low CBD strains often push deeper ego dissolution, while balanced profiles feel gentler, true to both Vedic warnings and modern studies. Beyond cannabinoids, aromatic compounds called terpenes contribute to what scientists term the entourage effect. Myrcene in cannabis actually speeds THC's entry into the brain. Think vivid visions arriving faster than you expect. This complex chemical orchestra creates effects far beyond what any single compound could produce alone. The resulting neurochemical changes map remarkably well onto traditional descriptions of mystical states. When cannabis alters sensory processing, colors intensify, sounds acquire new dimensions, and touch sensitivity increases, echoing descriptions of seeing the divine in all things from mystical texts across cultures. Research confirms that cannabis temporarily reduces activity in brain regions, maintaining our sense of separateness. This reduction corresponds directly with reports of ego dissolution, a cornerstone experience in mystical traditions worldwide. Brain scans revealed temporary connections forming between normally isolated regions, creating novel thought patterns that feel revelatory. Cannabis loosens filters on memory and connection, which is why you may feel profound aha moments, just as shamans described. The brain's normal filtering mechanisms relax, allowing connections between seemingly unrelated concepts that often feel like profound insights. Time perception shifts dramatically under cannabis influence. Minutes stretch into hours, or time seems to stop entirely, a result of changes in how the cerebellum processes temporal information. This sensation of timelessness mirrors what mystics describe in deep meditative states, complete immersion in the present moment. Pattern recognition enhances considerably, with users reporting connections between events, ideas, and sensory inputs that normally go unnoticed. The brain becomes temporarily more adept at identifying patterns across disparate information, explaining reports of hidden connections or synchronicities. These chemical shifts create windows of insight. No surprise ancient cultures treated cannabis as a sacred guide. The revelatory sensations, boundary dissolution, and profound significance aren't mere hallucinations, but legitimate alterations in consciousness produced by specific neurochemical changes. Understanding this chemistry doesn't diminish these experiences, but helps explain why humans throughout history have found cannabis to be a reliable tool for accessing non-ordinary states of consciousness. This convergence of ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience opens remarkable new possibilities for healing and growth. Modern research is revealing how cannabis can be harnessed as a therapeutic tool when ancient wisdom informs clinical practice. By unlocking the amygdala's guard dogs, patients can revisit trauma with less fear, opening space for real healing. In one study of treatment-resistant PTSD, cannabis-assisted sessions helped break cycles of intrusive memories by easing defensive barriers. Unlike conventional treatments that often work against defense mechanisms, cannabis temporarily softens these barriers, allowing patients to access difficult emotions without being overwhelmed. This creates a unique window where individuals can examine traumatic memories or limiting beliefs with greater emotional safety. When defensive mechanisms relax, patients can confront difficult emotions they might otherwise avoid. A therapist guides the experience, helping the individual process emotions that emerge during this receptive state. This approach doesn't bypass the therapeutic work, but rather creates conditions where it can occur more efficiently. Cannabis-induced states can interrupt destructive thought patterns by disrupting rigid neural pathways. Patients who have struggled with repetitive negative thoughts often report seeing their situation from entirely new angles during cannabis sessions. This cognitive flexibility enables them to break free from mental loops that have resisted conventional interventions. The heightened sensory awareness and present-moment focus that cannabis induces closely resembles states cultivated through meditation. When guided properly, these states help individuals develop greater awareness of body sensations, thoughts, and emotions. This enhanced awareness persists beyond the cannabis session, giving patients tools to recognize and regulate their responses in daily life. Therapists often borrow ancient practices like intention setting and integration circles to mirror the structure shamans used, maximizing benefits while curbing risks. These protocols typically include preparation sessions, the cannabis-assisted experience, and crucial integration work afterward to incorporate insights into daily life. For those facing end-of-life anxiety, cannabis shows particular promise. Research indicates that cannabis-facilitated experiences can reduce fear of death and increase feelings of meaning and connection. These experiences often feature the classic mystical elements of unity, transcendence of time and space, and profound positive emotions. But without screening for psychosis risk and guided integration, cannabis can reinforce negative loops instead of breaking them. It can also become a crutch rather than a tool for growth if used without proper guidance. Effective therapeutic use requires careful screening for contraindications like heart conditions or substance misuse history. This integrative approach honors both traditional knowledge and scientific understanding. The ceremonial contexts that ancient cultures developed weren't merely superstitious rituals, but sophisticated systems for maximizing benefits while minimizing risks. As we continue to study cannabis through both scientific and spiritual lenses, we're discovering that these perspectives aren't contradictory but complementary, each illuminating aspects of this remarkable plant that the other cannot fully explain. This convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science reveals something remarkable. Many traditional claims about cannabis have legitimate neurobiological foundations. What shamans described as opening the third eye, neuroscientists now identify as increased blood flow to specific brain regions. The dissolution of self in spiritual texts correlates with measurable changes in default mode network activity. This alignment doesn't diminish spiritual interpretations, but adds new dimensions to our understanding. Understanding the neurochemistry behind cannabis experiences doesn't reduce their significance. It enriches our appreciation of how this plant interacts with consciousness. Knowing the specific receptors and pathways doesn't make the resulting experience less profound. It simply maps the physical route through which non-ordinary states become accessible. The chemical explanation doesn't negate the validity of the experience itself. Cannabis research challenges the artificial divide between scientific and spiritual worldviews that has dominated Western thinking for centuries. Carhart-Harris notes that neural maps alone don't explain why we feel mystical oneness, leaving room for ancient insights. The hard problem, how physical brain states translate into subjective experience, remains unsolved, creating space for multiple interpretive frameworks. Some researchers now wonder if consciousness lies beyond neurons. Cannabis merely loosens the brain's filters to that deeper realm. Indigenous knowledge about plant medicines is gaining unprecedented recognition within scientific communities, acknowledging that ancient cannabis practices weren't random, but represented sophisticated systems for working with consciousness developed through generations of careful observation. The scientific exploration of cannabis exists within a broader renaissance in consciousness research. From studies on meditation to research into psychedelic therapies, science increasingly investigates states of mind once dismissed as merely subjective. Cannabis research contributes valuable data to this expanding frontier. Neither material nor mystical alone gives the full picture. Together, they guide us to integrate these states into lasting insight. Science excels at explaining mechanisms and measuring outcomes, while spiritual traditions offer contextual wisdom about intention, meaning, and integration. This integrated understanding honors both perspectives, acknowledging the biochemical pathways while respecting the profound meaning these experiences hold across cultures and throughout time. So what does this mean for you as a modern seeker? Let's wrap up by examining how this dual understanding, honoring both ancient wisdom and contemporary science, creates a more complete picture of cannabis and its potential role in human consciousness. As we've explored this ancient plant through both scientific and spiritual lenses, we've discovered something profound. These perspectives aren't competing, but complementary. Our journey from temple ceremonies to brain scans reveals how cannabis creates experiences with clear neurobiological underpinnings that nonetheless feel deeply meaningful. The real question isn't whether cannabis is sacred or scientific, it's how these insights transform your life. The brain chemistry explains how these states occur, while spiritual traditions provide wisdom about their meaning and integration. Next time you light up, notice where your mind goes. and see what wisdom waits on the other side. If this journey sparked something, hit subscribe to join our exploration of ancient wisdom and modern science. Share your experience in the comments and like to support more deep dives.